My name is Melvin, and I'm 21 years old. I left the town of Millfield a long time ago, and I have no plans to ever go back. There are things that happened there that I just can't forget, no matter how much time passes. When I was 7, my dad and I lived in a small house in a very remote part of Millfield. Isolation was just a way of life there. To get to our house, you had to take a long, winding dirt trail through dense trees. It was so narrow that the school bus couldn't get back there. Because of that, I had to walk over 2 miles down that trail every single day to get to school. Everything started to change on a chilly morning in late September. That morning was like any other. I put on my backpack and left early to catch the bus. The mist was still hanging low, the trees were damp, and the air had a bite to it. I walked along the familiar path, still half asleep and groggy. When I hit a sharp bend in the trail, I froze. There was an old, beat-up silver Toyota parked right in the middle of the path. I stood there for a few seconds, totally confused. This road was narrow and rugged. Nobody ever drove back here. I had never seen a car in this spot before. I crept a little closer to take a look. Inside the car, a woman was sitting perfectly still in the driver's seat. What creeped me out was that she didn't react at all. She just sat there, staring blankly at me. I felt a pit in my stomach, so I quickly stepped into the grass to walk around the car. As I tried to pass, she slowly turned her head to follow me. Her gaze stayed locked on my back, cold and sharp, until I finally broke into a run and reached the edge of town. When I got home that afternoon, I told my dad about it. His face went pale. He looked at me and said firmly, "Melvin, nobody just gets lost on that road." Starting the very next day, Dad began driving me to school and picking me up. The woman didn't show up again. Eventually, I started to think it was just a weird, one-time thing. After a week of seeing no sign of her, I told my dad I could handle walking to school on my own again. But that very afternoon, the car was back. This time, I didn't stop to look. I veered off and tried to circle around the trail through the edge of the woods. Suddenly, I heard the car door fly open and the sound of footsteps sprinting toward me. I immediately bolted. "Melvin!" The scream was high-pitched and tore through the quiet air. I went numb. How did she know my name? Pure terror turned into survival instinct. I ran through the trees like a hunted animal. Since I knew every inch of those woods, I managed to lose her by a dry creek bed and sprinted all the way home. I slammed the door behind me, gasping for air. My dad rushed out when he heard the noise. He looked terrified when he saw the state I was in. It took me a while to get the words out, but I finally told him everything, especially the part where she called out my name. My dad went into a state of shock. He looked like he aged 10 years in a matter of hours. Finally, he decided to tell me the truth he had been hiding for 7 years. He told me the woman I saw was most likely my mother, Marissa. I sat there, stunned. In my entire life, I had never heard my dad mention my mother. I had no idea who she was, no photos, no stories, nothing. Dad explained that she suffered from severe schizophrenia. She loved me in a way that was terrifying and distorted. In her episodes, she believed this world was too dark for me. She thought the only way to protect me was to take me with her to the afterlife. She had tried to take me away one stormy night years ago, and it almost ended in tragedy before my dad stopped her. When she was committed to a mental hospital back then, she screamed a vow. "I'll come back for him." After hearing the story, I just sat there in silence. My mind was a mess. I kept picturing that woman, a mother who was both heartbreaking and horrifying, someone I never truly knew. From that night on, our house became a fortress. My dad kept a gun by the door, and the police patrolled the area more often. But she was smart. She never showed her face when an adult was around. One night, during a light rain, I woke up to a steady tapping on my second-story window. I trembling as I pulled back the curtain. The woman was standing right there on the narrow ledge outside my bedroom window. The rain had matted her hair down, making her thin face look like a skull. For the first time, I was face to face with my mother, with only a pane of glass between us. She didn't try to break in. She just pressed her thin hand against the glass, stroking the spot where my face was. Her eyes were cloudy, but they were filled with a twisted kind of love. Her lips moved, whispering my name over and over, gesturing for me to come into her arms. I screamed for my dad. By the time he burst into the room with his gun, she had jumped down from the ledge and vanished into the pitch-black night as if she had never been there at all. My mother was caught a few days later. The police issued a permanent restraining order and moved her to a high-security treatment facility for good. My family left Millfield that very night, running away from the woman who gave birth to me. Now that I'm 21, I sometimes catch myself looking in the mirror and wondering how much of her madness is in my blood. Lately, I've been thinking about going to see her, but I don't know if I'm brave enough to face the person who is both my mother and my life's greatest nightmare. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
My husband and I moved into a house in the suburbs of New Jersey last December. We had been searching for a quiet place to settle down after years of renting in the city. This house was perfect. 3 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and an affordable price. My husband, a corporate employee, negotiated skillfully to get this rate. But that perfection was shattered when a foul odor appeared inside the house after the first week. At first, it was just a faint metallic smell. I thought it might be old plumbing or unshoveled garbage. But after a few days, the smell became so strong that I had to open every window in the house. I checked the sewage system, the trash cans, and the kitchen cabinets, but couldn't find the source. My husband was busy with work, rarely home, so he didn't truly grasp the severity of the problem. Since I didn't know anyone in the neighborhood yet, I decided to look for help online. I posted on a local community forum. I described the odor, and in my haste, I naively revealed my exact address. The reaction was faster than I expected. Within an hour, there were over 20 comments, but no one offered useful advice. Instead, they told the history of the house. 3 years ago, a brutal murder had occurred here. A man had murdered his wife and young son and buried the bodies in the backyard. The crime was discovered months later when neighbors reported a strange smell. Many on the forum suspected that there might still be remains left in the ground, or that the odor was a sign of something worse. I closed my laptop, my hands trembling. Did my husband know about this? I decided not to tell him immediately and to find out more first. A few days later, I discovered a strange man living in the shed in the backyard. He introduced himself as Terry, a homeless man who had squatted there since before we moved in. He said he wasn't harming anyone. He just needed shelter for the winter. I looked at him in his dirty clothes and heavy body odor and thought this was the source of the stench. I told my husband about Terry. At first, he was angry, saying he would go out and chase the man away himself. But then, perhaps seeing my anxiety, he decided to call the police. They came and took Terry away gently. The officer told me that homeless people often shelter in abandoned or sparsely occupied houses, and we should lock the shed door more securely. As expected, the heavy body odor vanished, but after a few days, a faint, almost rotten, fishy smell still lingered in the hidden corners. It wasn't horrific, but enough to keep me awake. The odor problem wasn't truly solved. Eventually, I told my husband, about the 3-year-old murder case that happened in the house. After some discussion, and wanting complete peace of mind from the shadow of the past, we decided to hire a priest to perform an exorcism. The priest walked around the house, sprinkled holy water, and read prayers. After that, the odor seemed to be completely swept away. I thought it was over, and I could start enjoying the new house. Afterward, I also got to know a woman named Maya, who lived nearby. She was a few years younger than me, friendly, and often came to visit. We had coffee together and chatted about life in the new neighborhood. Maya made me feel less lonely on the days my husband was at work. A peaceful week passed. Then the stench returned. This time it was much stronger and fiercer, as if something was decomposing right inside the house. In addition, the power in the house began to cut out for unknown reasons. Electricians came to check, but they found nothing wrong with the system. The smell caused me constant nausea. I started feeling dizzy. One afternoon when my husband was at work, the power suddenly went out completely. I went to his office to check the circuit breaker. As soon as I walked in, an unusually cold draft and the strongest, most pungent odor hit me. It led me to a large cabinet placed against the wall. I'd never noticed that cabinet before. It looked like a regular file cabinet, but when I touched it, I realized it was a deep freezer. Why would my husband need this in his office? I observed it for a moment longer, and then decided to open it. Inside, I saw a small object wrapped in a clear plastic bag. I stared at it for a few seconds before my brain processed the image. It was a baby, pale skin, eyes closed. I backed away, slamming the freezer lid shut. I ran out of the room, into the bathroom, and vomited everything in my stomach. My mind was spinning with hundreds of questions. Who was that child? Why was it there? And most importantly, did my husband know about it? I sat on the bathroom floor, taking almost 10 minutes just to try and control my breathing and the nausea. My reason told me to run immediately and call the police. But a crazy part of me wanted to know all the horrible truth. Finally, I returned to the office, my hands still shaking. I opened my husband's computer, searching for anything that could explain the situation. I found a text file. Inside was a list, names of several women with dates, and brief notes. I read each line. There were 5 names, and the last one, the most recent, clearly read, Maya, August 2nd, pregnant. Pregnant? Maya was pregnant? I remembered her visits, how she asked about my husband, about his work schedule. I thought she was just being curious, but now I understood she was tracking him. Or maybe she was trying to pressure him through me. I reread the list. 5 names, 5 women. If the baby in the freezer belonged to one of them, what happened to the others? All the pieces started fitting together. The initial stench might have been from a body before he bought the freezer. When the smell returned, it was because the power outages caused the freezer to malfunction, and the infant's body began to decompose. Everything started to make horrifying sense. He chose this house not because it was cheap, but because of its dark history. If anyone found something suspicious, people would blame the curse or the lingering remains from the old case. He had calculated everything from the start. I sat there looking at the computer screen with the list of names. I knew that if I confronted him, I would be in danger. My reason told me to act as if nothing had happened. I closed the computer, wiped away any traces. I wiped down the freezer, ensuring it looked untouched. I needed to get out of here before my husband came home. I took my phone and texted him in a casual tone. I feel better now. Going out to run some errands. He replied immediately with a smiling emoji. I drove out of the neighborhood. I drove far, to a rest stop on the highway, a place with many people and security cameras. I parked the car, walked into the public restroom, and called the state police. Not the local police. I didn't know if my husband knew anyone in that department. I spoke slowly, clearly, providing all the necessary information, and most importantly, there's an infant's body inside that freezer, and my husband is on his way home. The operator asked me to stay in a safe place and not return home. They would send police immediately. I sat in the car and waited. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. A police officer called, confirming they had arrived at the house and arrested my husband. He was trying to move the freezer when they stormed in. They had found the infant's body and were checking the entire house. The officer asked if I could come to the police station to give my statement. I agreed, still shaking. In the following days, I learned more horrific details. The police dug up the backyard and found 2 more infant bodies. They identified some of the women on the list. They were all acquaintances of my husband and had either gone missing or gone silent after becoming pregnant. Maya was also arrested on suspicion of complicity, although she insisted she knew nothing about the bodies. I had lived in that house, right on a mass grave. I had befriended Maya, whom I believed was just a friendly neighbor, but she was either on the list of victims or an accomplice. The level of depravity and calculation of the man I called my husband exceeded any disgusting crime I had ever known. I filed for divorce immediately while he was awaiting trial. I changed my name, sold everything related to that disgusting house, and moved to another state to start a new life. Fortunately, I got out in time, but the psychological wounds are permanent.
I'm Joseph. I'm 31 years old. I got treated for depression in Boston, then came back to my hometown, Lakeland, Florida. My mom died when I was a kid. My dad was my only family, and he spent his whole life farming and had a decent-sized farm back in his hometown. The day I got back, I didn't tell my dad ahead of time to surprise him. As soon as he saw me, he looked shocked and worried. "Joseph, what are you doing here?" "Surprise. I'm done with my treatment, and from now on, I'm gonna live here with you." I put my arm around my dad's shoulder and said, "What? Move back here to live?" My dad blurted out, kinda shocked. I just stared at him for a sec, then he smiled, gave me a pat on the shoulder, but he still looked worried. "You're really gonna trade being a software engineer for this tough farming job?" "I'm good," I told my dad to chill. Right then, some guy walked up to my dad, called him boss, and said the watering was all done. Seeing the confused look on my face, my dad goes, "This is Robert. He runs the planning area. But this is Owen's..." I didn't even get a chance to finish asking. "Owen took off 3 months ago," my dad said, and went right back to work. After walking around, I noticed all the old workers were gone. Maybe they quit as Owen did. I saw on the farm's website that my dad was always hiring, but only people without families, since the work's tough and takes up a lot of time. "But there's enough workers now. Probably more than before," I mumbled. "I'm so stoked to see you back. Relax for a bit. Don't stress about the farm." Dad came in and slapped me on the shoulder, totally catching me off guard. "I'm good, no worries. But why'd all the workers at the old farm quit?" I asked. "That's on them. Don't stress," Dad said as he walked out. The first few days back home, I felt chill with the fresh, cool air. I heard Dad say the farm's eggs sell for a good price because they're high quality, and now they're focusing on cranking up the amount. "Joseph, what's your plan?" Robert yelled, totally scaring me. Morning, Robert. I'm gonna check out the chicken feed warehouse. That's a spot nobody's supposed to go, didn't you know? I was totally thrown off by what Robert said. We'll handle everything else on the farm except this spot. The boss will take care of the chicken food himself. Thanks. Keep doing your thing. I headed over to the orange grove. I only saw my dad at dinner all day. After asking about stuff on the farm a bunch of times and seeing how uncomfortable he was, I stopped asking. One evening, I woke up to a noise, thinking it was a thief, so I jumped up fast and ran to the window to check it out. A dark shadow zipped by, heading toward the farm behind the house. I ran straight to my dad's room. "Dad, looks like someone broke in," I whispered, serious as hell. But my dad wasn't in the room. Where'd he go? Or was that dark shadow actually him? I quietly made my way to the back of the house. The whispering was coming from far off, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was Dad and Robert talking in front of the chicken feed area. I was gonna move closer to listen, but those two had already gone inside. Robert straight up said this area was off limits. So what's going on? I stood outside really torn about whether or not to sneak in. I didn't hear anything else coming from inside. After about 10 minutes, the grinding machine kicked on. The sound was low. Maybe Dad had soundproofed it or turned it down. Why grinding chicken feed at this time? I had so many questions and doubts. It was making me feel all restless and uneasy. I slowly pushed the door open to peek in, and after a few seconds, my eyes went wide. My stomach flipped, my throat went dry, and I felt like I was gonna puke. Dad's eyes suddenly shot over to the door where I was standing. I quickly turned around and ran straight to my room, locking the door behind me. The next morning, I booked a flight back to Massachusetts and just shot my dad a text that I was in Boston, but I was actually in New Bedford. I'm back in the psych ward again. Every night, I dream about the blade slicing into human skin, the sound of it tearing and crushing, mixed with that cold, mechanical noise. The bright red liquid sprayed out, splashing all over the machine and leaving these long, gross streaks. The crushed bits of flesh, skin, and bones got all messed up into small pieces, slowly sliding down the conveyor belt. The awful scene in front of me and the fear just hit me to my core. Owen and the old workers didn't quit. They got eaten by the chickens. It wasn't just them. It was a bunch of others too. What do I do now? Snitch on my own dad?
Back when I was 9, like 20 years ago, I spent Christmas with my uncle's family out on his farm in Terlingua, Texas. I moved in with my grandma after my parents split up. Even though I didn't have a whole family, I still had plenty of love from other relatives like my uncle. My uncle's second son was 2 years younger than me, and we were pretty close. I was pretty much jumping for joy when my grandma said I could stay there for Christmas. After we finished the awesome turkey dinner my aunt made, my cousin and I hung up 2 stockings with our wishes and names stitched on them, right on the Christmas tree. "Can I stay up till Santa shows up to say thanks, Mom?" my cousin asked my aunt-in-law. "No, sweetie. A good kid who gets presents doesn't stay up late, right?" My aunt-in-law was always sweet about it. "What about you, Finn? What'd you write to Santa?" my aunt-in-law suddenly asked, kind of startling me. "It's a secret," I whispered. My aunt-in-law just smiled and led me and my brother back to our room. Honestly, I just stuffed a blank piece of paper in my sock. I wasn't young enough anymore to fall for those stories adults tell. But back then, I was really trying hard to believe Santa was real. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe I had too much hot chocolate,
Or maybe it was my cousin. Her snoring was absolutely awful. After lying there a while, I went to the bathroom, hoping I'd feel comfortable enough to sleep. When I got back from the bathroom and headed to the living room, I saw a dark shadow pass by the window, and I just froze for a few seconds. Is Santa really coming? What time is it? I was curious, so I went to open the window and stuck my head out. The cold wind hit me like a slap, waking me right up. I looked around the big yard to the left of the house, and there was nothing weird, just the sound of some families still partying. I couldn't take the cold anymore, so I shut the window, shivering and covered in goosebumps. Just as I was about to head back to my room, a loud noise startled me. Beavis? I figured my cousin was awake, but there was no answer. As I got closer to the bedroom, it was all quiet, and Beavis's snoring was still going strong. I quietly tiptoed the last few steps to the bedroom. The noise happened again, then a bunch more, so I stopped and looked at the window again. Santa Claus? I shouted when I saw red and white shadows zip by. I rushed over to the window to check if what I was thinking was real, and then I saw something that would haunt me for life. It was totally Santa Claus, wearing that classic bright red coat, but his white beard was splattered with red, and each drop was slowly dripping down. In his hand was a big shiny knife, and red drops were dripping from the blade, making stains on the white snow. There was another man, his face all messed up, covered in red, and he looked absolutely terrified. The man was kneeling in front of Santa, shaking with fear and pain. The man's hands were gripping his stomach so tight that they were covered in red, and every breath was coming out all labored and wheezy. Then he tried to get away, looking for a way out, but his movements slowly faded and eventually just stopped. Santa Claus, no, the killer, looked down at the man who was dying, and a creepy smile crept across his face. He reached out and brushed his cheek like it was some kind of final sick joke. Then he finished him off with a deadly stab. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I was gonna explode. My stomach was doing flips, and I was feeling super nauseous, but I just couldn't look away from what was happening. That Santa totally saw me when he walked away. I wanted to scream and run to find my uncle and aunt, but my legs felt frozen, like I couldn't move at all. Santa looked at me and slowly lifted his bloody finger to his lips, like telling me to be quiet. I was frozen in place for a sec. My whole body felt numb, not from the cold, but from the fear that just took over me. Santa just took off, and I was standing there, not even sure how long it took before I just crumpled to the floor. I crawled back to my room, pulled the blanket over me, and I was still shaking like crazy. I couldn't get a wink of sleep that night. The next day, when the whole fam got together to open up the gifts Santa supposedly brought, everyone was all hyped, especially my cousin. Me, I still couldn't shake off the nightmare from last night. Plain, sweet, Beavis yelled, all pumped when he got his gift. Come on, Finn, open your present, my aunt-in-law said with a smile. I knew this was the gift my uncle and aunt-in-law got for me, not Santa. Santa was busy with other stuff last night, I mumbled. Huh? What'd you say? My aunt asked, but I dodged it real quick. Go check if Santa's got anything else to say to you guys, my uncle said to me and Beavis. Did Santa leave a message? Beavis said, all surprised, and then started digging around in the stocking. No way, he shouted when he spotted a red note. May my handsome boy Beavis be a healthy kid. Handsome boy, that's the nickname only you use for me. This is Santa's message just for you. My uncle shot Beavis a glare, looking all annoyed, then turned to me and said, You gotta keep this to yourself. After lunch, I headed back to my room and pulled out the note from my pocket. Keep it a secret. The letters were super bold, like a serious reminder. I crumpled up the note, squeezed it in my hand, and just started crying. The next day, I asked if I could go back to my grandma's, and that was the last time I saw my uncle and aunt-in-law. I totally dodged their questions. I just couldn't face them. I've never forgotten that. Like the fear and all made me totally hate Christmas and just want to hide away. This Christmas, I met Alita. She's the last missing piece that made my life feel complete. Alita said she hated Christmas too. Santa Claus killed my dad. I saw it all happen, but I couldn't do a thing. So, Alita and I just stuck together through that crazy night. But I know who did it, and Alita doesn't. I posted this story on Reddit because I wanted to share it and get some advice. I'm totally freaking out and scared. One afternoon, after cleaning up every corner of my room, I randomly found a diary with my name on it. I'm not going to tell you my real name. Just call me Mia. I was so stoked, like I just found a bunch of cash. So I could figure out what went down before I turned 12, because I don't remember a thing. I'm writing this down because if I lose my memory, this'll be proof to throw my mom under the bus in court. What was that? I read that line again, and it was stuck in the last line of the first page, in red ink instead of blue. Then, I flipped the diary over and checked out the owner's name again. It was me, my name. To figure out the answers to the questions in my head, I started reading the diary closely. May 13th, 2007. I was 7 back then. I am super sad. It was the first time I saw my parents fighting. I don't get why, but I saw my dad crying after my mom left. June 22nd, 2007. Today, while I was playing store with my best friend, I needed some paper, so I dashed into my parents' room to grab some. I saw on my mom's computer screen, death benefit. I don't really get it. It's like death, but why do I get benefits? After reading all this, my mind was all over the place. July 18th, 2007. Dad hasn't been home for 2 days, and I miss him so much that I called him up. Dad promised to get me a princess doll when he gets back, and I can't wait. After dinner tonight, I heard Mom talking, and I was sure it was Dad, so I happily ran over. But nope, he was super creepy. Mom said he was Dad's friend. August 30th, 2007. Dad's home. This morning, Mom made breakfast for the whole family, and she and Dad were laughing together. I saw Mom make 3 plates of food. Then she added spices to one, but not the other 2. Dad probably likes his food spicy. September 2nd, 2007. Dad passed away. I miss him so much. I cried when I read this. I didn't have any memories of Dad, but now it's different. I looked up at the bookshelf, grabbed all the dolls off it, and hugged them tight to my chest. There's gotta be at least one of them that Dad gave me, or maybe all of them. September 25th, 2007. Since Dad passed away, that man Mom said was Dad's friend has been coming around a lot more, and I really don't like him. Today, I even heard Mom and him talking about taking me to the doctor. I'm in good shape, right? That was the last day I wrote in this diary. I guess I got taken to the doctor, and all my memories from before I turned 12 were taken away by him. I grew up knowing barely anything about my dad passing away. I lived with my mom and stepdad. I don't know if it was really my mom anymore, or if it was the devil inside her. Writing this on Reddit, I cried a ton, not knowing how to deal with everything. Looks like the next one in Mom and Stepfather's plan is Grandma, and then it's me. I guess I got some serious insurance. I wonder if that's enough to make Mom happy. She took care of me for a long time. I gotta get Grandma away from these evil people. Even though I thought about calling the police, like calling the police on my own mom, I just can't do it. Updating the comments, I saw someone gave me an advice. You should totally take Grandma away tonight, Bethany. Head to the police station and report what happened. I was super scared, so I was at Grandma's house, locking all the doors. I thought I got caught. That person knew my real name, and I never told anyone. It seemed like Mom. My mom sent a bunch of missed calls and messages for 3 hours asking where I was. I didn't dare to answer or pick up the phone. I was scared, so I hugged my grandma tight and cried a lot. She was old and weak, just could only get around in a wheelchair. Maybe my mom lured me and my grandma out at night to easily take us out. My brother has returned after 4 years of being missing, and I'm about to get into big trouble. 4 years ago, my brother went missing right after graduating from university. A handsome university student with excellent academic performance, a clean personal life, and a beautiful girlfriend who has been with him for 5 years. That's my brother in the eyes of everyone. But in my eyes, he is sick, ugly, and insane. He always thinks he's right and forces all of his thoughts on me. That perfect appearance deceives everyone, even our parents. If he's upset, I will definitely get beaten, even if it has nothing to do with me. He may look clean and elegant, but he can go on a whole week without showering, instead bathing in cologne. If he likes my food, he'll just eat it without even asking for permission. If he remembers, he'll leave a few small pieces. Otherwise, he'll eat everything up. The day he went missing, I actually felt happy, though I knew that wasn't right. But my life became much more peaceful, a lot more peaceful. My mother was in agony and utter desperation. My mother devoted all her time, energy, and the family's money to search for him by any means necessary. His belongings in the shared room were not allowed to be changed, even in the slightest detail. Over time, the police, the FBI, and both my father and I gradually lost hope, but my mother did not. My mother always believed that one day her beloved son would return. When investigating my brother's relationships, the police found them to be very complex. That perfect boy had many conflicts with his classmates from high school and even college, but they all had alibis in the case of his disappearance. My house is located in a rather sparse area next to the edge of the forest. The local police also deployed all the most modern equipment and methods to search for him, but there were no results. He seemed to have vanished without leaving a trace. For 4 years, I became the sole focus of my family's attention. I grew tall and handsome, just like my brother. Now, I'm 22 years old, the same age my brother was when he went missing. The family is proud of me, but I know that every time my mother looks at me, she remembers him and secretly cries. On his 28th birthday, my brother returned. His appearance hadn't changed much, except for a more mature face. He was still wearing the same clothes he had on the day he went missing. Needless to say, my parents were overjoyed, especially my mother. She couldn't tell whether everything was a dream or reality. My brother was immediately taken to the hospital,
for a thorough health checkup. The police were also present to take his statement about everything that had happened, but he was uncooperative and very withdrawn. But he seemed to be doing quite well, and his body showed no signs of injury. My brother has returned after 4 years of being missing, and I'm about to get into big trouble. On the first night he returned home, I couldn't even eat anything at dinner. Before, he used to hate me. Now that he's back with such a sullen personality, he's even more unpredictable. That night, when I went to bed, my brother just sat on the bed staring, making me afraid to even breathe loudly. I lay down under the blanket, unable to sleep in this tense atmosphere. Suddenly, there was a small noise, and I jolted awake, frozen in place. My brother was holding a small knife, pointed directly at me. "Now it's your turn." I immediately ran away, as fast and as far as I could, without having time to call for my parents. My brother chased closely behind me, with the knife still pointed straight ahead. His face was cold and expressionless, his eyes wide open and not blinking even once. I felt like I was running far away from the Grim Reaper's Sith. I ran into the forest, not knowing how long I had been running, until my 2 feet were deformed and mangled. I stopped in front of a deep abyss, and at that moment, I felt an excruciating pain in my feet spreading throughout my body. Turning back, my brother had gotten very close. The scene felt very familiar. It had happened 4 years ago. It's just that my position and my brother's have swapped. That night, when I saw him panicking and slipping, I felt a sense of joy. I didn't need to do anything to him. Even if he was found, there would be no evidence for me to fear. I quietly left the knife in its place in the kitchen and lived with that secret for 4 years. I thought I had completed the mission. I woke up, looked around for a long time to realize that I was still alive. Time passed for nearly 2 months. I had slept a long sleep with my body suffering multiple injuries. The police found me at the bottom of the ravine in the forest. Miraculously, I had survived. They were still actively investigating the cause and the perpetrator. I told my parents to immediately stop the investigation. Although they were very confused, they followed my insistence. I asked my parents about my brother. They said he had left and would contact us later. The fear, pain, and despair he felt 4 years ago, I have now experienced as well. I wonder how he managed to survive. Will he return and forgive me? I found out that my grandfather, my dad, and the devil were actually the same person. I'm Melvin, and I'm 17. I've lived with my grandparents and Aunt Sam since I was little, and I've never met my parents. I've always felt loved by my grandmother and Aunt Sam, but not by my grandfather. I feel like there's always been a gap between me and my grandfather that just can't be closed. He's never really shown me any words of care or loving gestures. When I was 10, I used to run home from the bus stop all excited. The sound of kids crying left me feeling really confused. When I walked into the living room, I saw my grandmother holding a baby wrapped in a blanket, and she was crying too. "Come here, Melvin. This is your little brother, Henry." I was really curious. As a 10-year-old, I had a lot of questions, like why I suddenly had a younger brother, and whether he was born by our mother, Carrie.
You're not allowed to ask questions that go against any instructions from adults.
My grandfather's voice sounded really annoyed when he heard my questions. Aunt Sam quickly pulled me over to see my brother.
but I was in tears because I felt sorry for myself and didn't really feel anything for Henry. I stayed in the room that my grandmother said was my mom's room, and Henry stayed with my grandparents since he was too young. I asked my grandmother about my parents many times, but she just smiled with a red, tearful face. My grandmother always told me to keep the room just as it was, down to the smallest details. The picture showed a very young and beautiful woman, and my grandmother said that that was my mother, Carrie. I don't have any information about my father, and neither do my grandparents. I don't share many traits with my mother, but resemble my grandfather more, and I really don't like that. I've had insomnia since I was a kid, probably around 7 or 8 years old, because of all the different noises. Sometimes it was the laughter of kids, and other times it was the crying and scolding. I could never quite pinpoint where it was coming from. I told my grandmother everything because she always listened to me.
Stop making up stories and asking for things.
My grandfather's voice sounded annoyed when he overheard me telling my grandmother that the room needed better soundproofing. My grandmother didn't have much of a say in the house because she didn't work. The whole family relied on my grandfather's salary for all the expenses. I saw my grandfather get angry with her many times, even throwing away the dinner she had just made because she mentioned my mother. She wanted him to spend some money to hire a detective to find my mother, Carrie. My grandfather didn't seem to care about my mother, so I could kind of understand why he didn't show much love for my siblings and me. Because I was really afraid of my grandfather and didn't want to cause any trouble for my grandmother, I tried to put up with those noises for many years. Sometimes, hearing the laughter of the kids made me laugh too. I also have a younger brother, Henry, but we always had to follow my grandfather's strict rules, so we were all pretty closed off. As I grew up, I always planned to visit my mother and ask her why she didn't bring my brothers and me along, or why she never came to visit us. One day, the family dinner took a serious turn when my grandfather announced that he was at risk of losing his job. At night, I heard the two adults arguing about money and some illness, along with the sound of a child crying. I put a pillow over my ears, but I couldn't block out the annoying noise. It sounds like it's Grandpa. I sat up and walked around the room, trying to find a spot where I could hear the noise as clearly as possible. The woman's scream was really loud, and then the argument stopped. I had a lot of doubt about the man's voice. For almost a week now, the noise I've been hearing every night is a mix of a child crying and a woman's soothing voice. Of course I can't sleep. The child's crying might mean they're uncomfortable or sick. I know this from seeing my grandmother take care of Henry when he was little. She gently held Henry, comforted him, and sang him a lullaby with a worried and tired expression. A noise that sounded like a door opening came from right outside. I quietly went to open the door, and it was my grandfather. He must be thirsty. I figured that since there was a bathroom in my grandparents' bedroom, he wouldn't use the one in the living room. I followed him down to the living room, and instead of turning right to go to the kitchen, my grandfather turned left. I kept a safe distance so he wouldn't notice me and kept following him. My grandfather went into the basement. I waited until he was inside, then I hurriedly followed him. But by the time I got to the basement, my grandfather had disappeared. I walked around looking for him but couldn't find him, and I started wondering if I was dreaming. I decided to sit in a hidden corner and wait, and eventually I fell asleep. The sound like a lock made me jump awake. I was surprised when my grandfather appeared out of nowhere and left the basement. I didn't tell my grandmother, but decided to keep an eye on my grandfather for a few more days. For the next 3 days, my grandfather didn't do anything out of the ordinary and didn't go to the basement again. I was tormented by the sound of a little girl crying and the woman's constant cursing. In her scolding and cursing, she mentioned Mark, my grandfather. I grew more and more curious about my grandfather and was sure he was hiding some kind of secret. On the 4th night, I saw my grandpa pulling back a shelf in the basement, and it opened up to another basement behind it. While I was still in shock, my grandpa led a woman holding a little girl, and they both ran out of the basement in a hurry. The woman's face looked a lot like my mom's. I didn't really react, and I'm not sure what I was feeling at that moment. I just stayed in that corner of the basement until the next morning. The police, along with my grandparents, Aunt Sam, and the woman who looked like my mom, came back. With the police urging him on, my grandpa reopened the door to the other basement. 4 more people came out one by one, all calling the woman Mom and my grandpa Dad. My grandmother immediately collapsed and gasped. I ran over to hug her, and everyone was surprised. The strange woman looked at me, burst into tears, and called my name. The whole truth about my parents, the 2 people I had been longing to see for 17 years, was finally revealed. The noises I heard every night were from my mom and my siblings, who had been living in a dark, cramped basement. My mom had been imprisoned for 24 years by her own father, someone I didn't know whether to call Dad or Grandpa. I had 7 siblings in total. It should have been 8, but one of them died because my mom was abused while she was 7 months pregnant. My grandfather took Henry and me upstairs because the basement was too cramped and told us that my mom had abandoned us. I can't forgive the person who committed this terrible crime, but he did create my 7 siblings. Mother Carrie endured extreme physical and mental pain. Even though she hated the person who took away her future and happiness, she always said that she loved and protected all of us at all costs. I love my mom and my other siblings a lot, for I'm the lucky one. I've decided to move on and live a new, happy life with my grandmother, Mother Carrie, Aunt Sam, and my 6 siblings. But I never stopped wondering why my grandfather did such horrible things to his own daughter. The story is based on a real-life event about the tragic life of a girl named Elizabeth Fritzl. Her real dad is Joseph Fritzl, a messed up, creepy guy. He started abusing his daughter Elizabeth when she was just 11. When Elizabeth was growing up, she tried to run away from her monster of a dad a bunch of times, but it never worked. For 7 years, starting when Elizabeth was 11, Joseph started working on turning the basement into a prison. On August 28, 1984, when Elizabeth was only 18, he drugged her and locked her up in the dark basement. He raped her every day, and after 24 years, Elizabeth had 7 kids with him, going through unimaginable pain and humiliation. In April 2008, Joseph finally let his oldest daughter, Kristen, who was really sick, go to the hospital. From there, the truth came out, and the whole world saw the face of a monster.
I'm Ryan, 17 years old, living with my parents in Arizona. I have a passion for the gym. My father is my inspiration. My dad designed a fairly large room full of exercise equipment at home. Dad has an admirably toned body at the age of 58. My mother is quite young, 13 years younger than my father. Mom doesn't like to exercise but prefers skin caring and follows a strict diet. I'm very proud to have parents with outstanding and youthful appearances. But I have nothing in common with them, except for my mother's blue eyes. I don't care too much about this. After all, I'm quite handsome according to everyone's compliments. In my father's practice room, there's a wooden shelf containing many medals of large and small awards from gymmers. The top position in the middle of the wooden shelf is a picture of my mother when she was young. But in that photo, my mother has brown eyes. In my mother's room, there's also a very strange picture of a woman. I have never met her before. She's very beautiful, short brown hair and blue eyes like me and my mother. I witnessed several times my mother clutching that photo and crying, looking at her in so much pain and torment. I asked my mother about the photo of that woman. She just smiled at me and did not answer. After many times like that, I didn't ask about that woman anymore. My parents rarely show affection to each other. They respect each other's private space. They have a lot of love for me, but in two completely different ways. Outside of studying, I enjoyed playing music and exercising in the gym. Everything was very normal until the last month. Every time I step into the gym, it feels cold and gloomy, a feeling I've never had before. At first, I didn't pay too much attention to it, nor did I tell my dad about it. Until recently, a series of scary events that happened caused me unable to ignore it anymore. The first time was when I practiced at 9 p.m. I went into the room and turned on the lights and warmed up thoroughly. I started the workout by jogging, but as soon as I stepped on the treadmill, the light in the room suddenly turned off. Power blackouts in the area where I live are quite rare. Looking into the next room, the electricity was still on. I thought the light bulb was broken. But when I got close to the switch, it was in the off state. I turned my hand on the switch and the light came back on. At that time, I did not have any doubts or feelings of fear. I continued the training session and finished at 11 a.m. The second time was also when I was alone in the gym. It was around 10 p.m. I'm doing shoulder raises using resistance bands. Suddenly, the song I was playing turned off, and a few seconds later, a child's giggling voice froze the blood in my veins. The laughter was so loud and haunting, I shivered and got goosebumps. About 5 seconds later, the laughter disappeared. My music continued playing. I stopped the exercise, went to drink water, wiped my sweat to calm down, wondering whatever just happened was real or I was hallucinating. That day I finished my homework early. I didn't tell my parents about those two strange encounters because they would be so unbelievable. The third time it was not at night, but around 4 p.m. It was the weekend, so I spent time practicing earlier than usual. I improved my exercises with barbells. Lying down to lift weights, I feel like it's much heavier, even though my weight remains the same. After lifting it about 4 times, my mind started to feel dizzy and ringing in my ears. I closed my eyes lightly and then opened them to regain consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I brought the weight down at the same time. From the horizontal bar of the dumbbell, a woman hung, her long hair hanging down, her big eyes wide open, her mouth wide open, filled with blood. In her arms, she held a crying newborn baby. The woman pressed her terrifying face close to mine. Her loud scream and the child's cry hurt my ears. I was startled and screamed loudly, unable to control the strength in my arms. The dumbbell pressed hard on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. At that moment, the woman also disappeared. I braced myself, used all my remaining strength to place the dumbbell on the support bar and sat up, clutching my chest and panting. It took a few minutes to calm down. I was about to get up and go to my room. Accidentally, I looked at my mother's photo on the wooden shelf. Mom looked at me,
her unfamiliar brown eyes filled with anger and resentment. I was startled to remember the woman's face just now. She looks a lot like my mother, but it's the mother in the picture. I went into the bathroom and poured cold water down really hard to really wake up. Running to my parents' room, I wanted to tell them about the horrors I had experienced, but just as I approached the door, I heard two people arguing.
"You are the one who killed my wife and son. You even destroyed your own face just to be here."
I was so shocked. I rooted to the spot, listening to every bitter word my parents said. It turned out that the woman with blue eyes in the picture in my mother's room was my mother's real face. So what about me? What is my true identity?
My name's Richard, 35 years old. I'm working for a construction company, major in structural engineering. 2 years ago, I was assigned to researching on a dismantle of a building. It's a building in the outskirt of the city, in the eviction area. The building was large and very sturdy, constructed some 15 years earlier. In order to dismantle it safely, I'd need to study the site in order to calculate the amount of explosive used and in which area so the collapse would be at the least risks. My supervisor had greenlit on the permission to stay in the building and facilitate the structural study. The day I moved in, 2 tenants welcomed me in, a mother and son. The mother name's Kate, 66 years old, and her son Jim, 41 years old. They lived here for a long time and seemed to understand the building very well, even providing me with very detailed structural maps. Jim was pretty gentle and polite, while Kate, in stark contrast, was rather rude and seemed to ignore me at every turn. My accommodation was a room on the 3rd floor. I scoured the entire building, and I'd admit this house architecture was really strange. Advancing to the 2nd floor, the walls were sunken down with a strange cave-in, about 6 feet high, 3 feet wide, and about 1 foot sunken in. Within the sunken part hung a bundle of roses. I came closer to take a better look, man. The wall there was like at least 3 feet. I asked Jim about this disparity and why no one bothered fixing it. He just smiled softly. That's where my dad passed away when the building came down to the final phase. An accident, and he's buried in the cement. I was really shocked at his revelation, while Jim wasn't so thrilled about it. Moving up to the 3rd floor, I asked Jim further about the architecture and the building blueprints. As far as I was told, the architecturer who designed this building is Christopher, a rather famous one in the field. Jim told me that 15 years ago, Christopher had vanished without a trace. All police attempts came up empty-handed, and all of them agreed that Christopher left behind a rather mysterious building that even them couldn't crack it. Jim told me about Christopher's old room in the highest floor and told me that this room was off-limit. I agreed and returned to my room, starting with the instruments and study of the basic layout. However, in the evening when I was taking a shower, I could hear sounds coming from behind the glass. However, upon checking everything, I couldn't find anything unusual at all. At night when I sleep, that sound once again rang out. It felt kinda like someone's calling me or calling for help. Later the following morning, I went downstairs and met Kate in the kitchen. I asked her whether there was anyone else residing in the building and was told that the 3 of us was the only residents here. After breakfast, I began my observation to mark up the foundations for demolition. When I made my way to the highest floor, I remembered Jim's order, but I was curious, so I ventured further into Christopher's old room. There was a lot of architecture books there, and quite a few personal stuffs that weren't coated in dust at all, as if it had been regularly used. I was rummaging through the stuffs until a voice boomed from behind me. "You just forgot what I've told you already." Jim stood in the doorway, looking at me, smiling. Yet I felt so uneasy by that smile. I told him that I just wanted to look for additional information of the building that would help in my survey. After leaving the room, I felt very strange about Jim. When I was strolling on the second floor hallway, I saw Kate standing facing the wall that her husband died on. She brought over a fresh bundle of roses, hands over the deflated area. She must have missed her husband dearly. After realizing my gaze upon her, she threw back her cold gaze upon me. She demanded I stop all demolition attempts, because she'd rather die in the house rather than seeing it demolished. I could have no way to console her about it. After all, it's what I had to do. That night I went to bed rather late, yet suddenly I heard someone wailing and begging. Walked out of the room, I was surprised to know that it was Kate. She was kneeling and crying on the deflated wall commemorating her husband's demise. She begged him not to come back for her anymore. The pain in her voice made me shudder. I thought there's some crazy secrets that was hidden in this very household. At night, I woke up due to a sudden sense of cold, enough to make me shiver. When I was able to open my eyes, I realized that I was locked up in a very tight space, with slippery walls surrounded. I was in full panic, slammed hard on the walls and screamed aloud, hoping for someone's attention. Suddenly the ceiling opened up, came over with blinding white light shining down upon me. A shadow appeared, quietly looked down upon me, despite my ceaseless pleading for help. That shadow didn't say anything, but just pouring down a thick substance. Only when it came and touched me that I realized it was all cement. The caustic wet cement seemed to have eating through clothes and body. The pain was unbearable, and I could only scream and hope it would go away. Until the moment the cement rose overhead and the substances streamed through all my orifices. It was until that I jolted completely awake, the caustic taste still linger in my mouth. It was all just a bad nightmare, and thanks to that, I was unable to go back to sleep. Later that morning, I sneaked back to Christopher's room to search for additional information relating to this household. Before I was able to come in, I realized the room was occupied. It was Jim. He's rather, verse around this part of the house. Jim went to the corner of the room and pushed on some hidden furniture there, revealing a large hole within. I carefully marked the location in my memory to avoid Jim's detection. A few days later, I tried to act as normal as I could in front of the two tenants. Every location for demolition charges and building foundations had been made and mailed back to the company's headquarters for processing. Kate was becoming more and more cold and rude, while Jim was acting rather relaxed. On my last day there, I snuck up on the secret chamber in Christopher's workroom when everyone had fallen asleep. It was a rather small, dampened place with 2 observation holes carved out into my bedroom and bathroom. So, Jim had always kept me under his watch from the start. When I was deep in my thought, I saw Jim sneaking to my bedroom, a sharp knife on his hand. He slowly made his way to my bed, swinging it high. He swiftly lifted up my sheet for a strike, but then stopped when couldn't see me there. Those actions were in stark contrast with the gentle smile that man often wore on his face. It was when I realized that Jimmy Guy was no joke. He's truly a serial killer, hidden in plain sight. Jim angrily stormed to the bathroom. After a deep breath, he quickly ran out of the room. I knew where he's heading and placed myself accordingly. Right across Christopher's room, I could hear raging footsteps getting closer and closer. So I did the only logical thing I could, closed the door shut and locked it from behind. The door suddenly bulged up by strong impacts. Okay, that guy was really into me now. I thought, braced myself in the short corner behind the door. Open up! This is the police. Hearing that, I knew that I would be safe and opened up the door to the authority. So as a precaution, I called the police before venturing here to this door. Now safe, I could see the police arresting Mrs. Kate and Jim. Initial diagnosis concluded that he's suffering a serious case of schizophrenia. When the building was manually dismantled, workers there discovered a small hidden section right behind my room. In there was a dying old man. That was Christopher. After recovery, he told that he was the grandfather of Jim. That twisted man had buried his own father alive in concrete, and I legally imprisoned his grandfather for 15 years. I didn't dare to imagine what would become of me if I hadn't alerted the police before going to the room.
My boyfriend won't let me eat anything except what he makes. Me and Lewis have been together for over a year. We've got a sweet relationship, going through all the ups and downs like any other couple. Lewis is super picky. Every single thing I eat has to be made by him. But honestly, I'm cool with it. One time he got home late from work, and instead of making him deal with cooking, I went ahead and made dinner myself. He came back super mad, grabbed the pan off the stove, and tossed the food I was cooking straight in the trash. Lewis yelled, "I'm telling you one last time, don't cook anything else." I was shocked. Yeah, my cooking's not as good as his, but he didn't have to act so crazy about it. I didn't talk to Lewis for 3 days after that, but he finally said sorry with a big home-cooked dinner, and we made up. We never go out to eat. We always just cook at home. Lewis won't buy food from the grocery store because he thinks it's from who knows where. He even brings his own food in a bag to company or family parties. A bunch of times, my friends told me to dump Lewis because they thought he was kind of messed up. Everything about Lewis was great, except for his weird eating habits. He was super caring and loyal, so I decided to just roll with it. But the more I tried, the weirder Lewis got. One weekend, he was out from the crack of dawn till late afternoon. He came home with a big bag, and his clothes were all stained with this dark red stuff that I was pretty sure was blood. Lewis said he couldn't trust the meat guy, so he went to the farm and asked the owner to butcher the animals right in front of him. "You're crazy, Lewis!" I shouted at my boyfriend. He didn't say anything, just finished up the meat and stashed it in the freezer. That night, the sight of Lewis's bloody clothes and his blank face had me thinking a lot. Looking at my boyfriend next to me, I was like, did he just hit up the meat farm? But then I decided to just ignore where Lewis's meat was coming from. Right before Christmas, Lewis said his parents wanted us over for dinner, but he didn't want to go. But I really wanted to go. I'd never met his parents, and I wanted to ask them about Lewis's weird eating habits. After a whole day of bugging him, Lewis finally said yes. On Christmas Day, we were all set to roll out. I got all dressed up and put together a nice gift basket while Lewis was still in the kitchen whipping up dessert. As we pulled up in front of his house, Lewis kept telling me to only eat the stuff he made. I agreed to make it quick, and we both went into the house to a warm welcome from his parents. They were super classy, friendly, and loaded. During the meal, his parents and I were happily chatting while Lewis was quiet. I felt really rude for constantly turning down the food from his parents. When he stepped out to take a call, I had a little booze in me and totally forgot all about Lewis's rules. I tried the veggie salad while his parents were all happy and excited about it. It was awesome. I totally got where my boyfriend's cooking skills came from. When I asked why he had those weird eating habits, his mom just sighed. "We used to have a maid, but she just vanished." That same day, we found out the food she made was poisonous. I guess that's why she took off. Ever since then, Lewis has been kind of freaked out. He learned to cook and makes all his own food now. I saw how helpless his parents were and just ended up understanding and loving my boyfriend even more. The problem was the booze was getting to me, so I secretly snuck some food from Lewis's parents' place and I definitely couldn't let him find out. The next day, when Louis went to work, I couldn't wait anymore. I grabbed the food his parents gave me last night, heated it up, and dug in. Just as I was almost done eating, I saw something in the food that made me choke. It was a human finger, like the pinky finger to be exact. I screamed and tossed the plate of food right on the ground. I crawled into the bathroom and kept throwing up for an hour until all that was coming up was just this bitter yellow stuff from my stomach. When Louis got back, he rushed over, looking surprised, mad, and helpless. I asked to be taken to the hospital to get all that food out of my system, and Louis jumped right on it. As soon as I got out of the hospital, I asked Louis to take me to the farm where he got the meat, and he totally went along with it, no questions asked. After seeing the whole slaughtering process, I trusted my boyfriend. But after that Christmas, I just couldn't eat meat anymore. Louis looked at me all helpless and said, "Maybe my parents' meat grinder is messed up again."
I'm Emily, and I had recently moved to Seattle, Washington. I rented a room in a boarding house that was only for women tenants. The landlord greeted me warmly. He explained that due to the recent serial killer case being covered in the media, many people were looking for secure places like his boarding house, and he had only one vacant room left. He confidently stated that his place had the highest level of security in the area. The security and alarm systems were always the top priority. Emergency buttons were installed in both the bedroom and the bathroom. Pressing them would directly contact the security company in the building next door, ensuring an immediate response 24/7. The landlord showed me room 412. Everything in the room was exactly as he described, so I was very satisfied. I signed the lease agreement that same afternoon. The first few days were busy with work and my new life. I thought I was starting to settle in when something terrifying happened. I started noticing a strange man. The first time was in front of the building when I was coming home from work. His eyes followed me as I walked past. I figured he was waiting for someone he knew. I ran into him a second time, also in front of the building. This time, he looked directly at me with a serious expression. I quickly entered the code for the main door leading into the hallway and locked it immediately. My reaction felt a little exaggerated and silly at the time. The next day, I was walking home after buying some supplies when I distinctly felt someone walking behind me. The distance between us was closing fast. My steps sped up and my heart pounded. When I got near the building, I ran inside as fast as I could. Once I got into my room, I immediately pressed the emergency alarm button. A few minutes later, 2 security guards arrived, but the strange man was gone. I tried to explain what had just happened. Finally, they said they would check the hallway camera and then left. After that incident, the man stopped appearing near the building. I thought everything was over until one day. I worked late and got home quite late. The parking lot was pitch black, with only a few scattered cars left. I quickly walked toward my car when suddenly a strong force pinned me from behind and a hand clamped tightly over my mouth. I struggled but couldn't get free. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you," the voice whispered right next to my ear. After a few seconds, I stopped fighting, and he slowly loosened his grip. I turned around. It was the same man who had been lurking near me all those days. He was tall, thin, and probably about 30 years old. I backed up, ready to run, but his next words made me stop. "I know what you think of me, but I'm not a bad guy. I need to talk to you about room 412. My ex-girlfriend used to live in that room. She died 3 months ago. She chose to end everything because of some miserable jerks." I swallowed, trying to maintain distance. He took out his phone and showed me a video of a girl taking a shower that was posted on an adult website. The camera angle showed the girl was being secretly filmed without her knowledge. This video was widely shared. She couldn't take it and chose to end her life on the rooftop of this building. The police couldn't investigate because there was no evidence. The video's source couldn't be traced, and the victim was dead. The perp even threatened to sue me for defamation. "You are living in that room. You might be being filmed right now. Trust me. What are you planning to do next? Help me find the hidden camera to use as evidence. Please help me get justice for her." Everything sounded crazy, but the emotion in his eyes was too real. I finally agreed. Back at the boarding house that night, I couldn't sleep. I used my mobile data, went incognito, and searched for information about the incident at this building 3 months ago. It was true that an event had occurred just as the man described. I looked around the room with suspicion. The alarm button on the wall suddenly seemed questionable. What if that really was where a camera was hidden? It was mounted in a high position, pointing directly at the center of the room. And more importantly, there was one in the bathroom too. I started searching online for information about hidden cameras. I didn't just read articles. I watched dozens of tutorial videos on how to detect hidden recording devices, both from security experts and former victims. I took notes on common installation spots. I learned how to distinguish between a regular screw head and a disguised camera, and how to use reflected light to find a lens. I watched videos demonstrating how to check using a phone camera and a small handheld mirror. I took a small mirror into the bathroom, pretending to put on makeup and recording myself to share a beauty tip. I moved the phone camera angles naturally to get my best side. I used my phone camera to scan the alarm button on the ceiling. At a specific angle, the flash reflected back as a tiny circular dot. It wasn't metal. It was a layer of glass. I left the bathroom, pretending not to have noticed anything. I needed to create a plausible excuse to disable the device without raising suspicion. I turned on the hot water in the tub and closed the door tightly. The steam built up densely. After nearly half an hour, the alarm button made a sputtering sound and then went dead. I waited a few more minutes and called the landlord, saying the device seemed to short circuit after I took a hot bath. He said he would send someone to fix it in the next day or two. I texted the man to update him. I explained clearly. The alarm button in the bathroom had a small glass dot that reflected light, exactly where he had mentioned. It was disguised extremely well, but I was certain it was a camera. He told me to keep the scene intact and to let him contact the police. He promised to move quickly. From that moment, I no longer felt safe in my own room. I knew I was being watched. Every time I showered, every time I changed clothes, I had to stay calm, pretending I didn't know. Any strange movement could raise suspicion. I always kept my back to the device, minimized all my activities, and tried not to stare at where the camera was mounted. Finally, one Tuesday morning, a search warrant was issued. The police raided the boarding house and the security company building next door simultaneously. They seized dozens of server devices, hard drives, and uncovered a whole network of cameras installed in every room of the boarding house. The landlord, the man I thought was kind and trustworthy, turned out to be the ringleader of a major criminal organization. He owned both the boarding house and the security company, exploiting the trust of tenants to secretly film them and produce illegal videos. Those videos were then distributed on dark websites, bringing in huge profits for him and his accomplices. I moved out of the boarding house that very day. The police assured me that all the videos of me and the other women living in the building would be permanently deleted. But nothing can completely erase the feeling of being violated. It took many weeks after that before I could get a full night's sleep. The feeling of private space being invaded is like an invisible wound, aching every time I remember it. But I also realized that my initial fear of the strange man almost made me miss the opportunity to escape the real danger. I don't call myself brave. I just did what I had to do, for myself first and for the other women. Since then, I've understood that safety does not lie in promises or a seemingly trustworthy appearance. Safety comes from being clear-headed enough not to trust blindly and courageous enough to face the truth. Vigilance and caution are never too much, especially when we are women, because the place where we let down our final guard might be the most vulnerable spot of all.
Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, Let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
I am Mike. Everything began in early winter in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dave, my best friend since college, and I were working together at a newly opened branch of a tech company. We often went to a newly opened luxury gym nearby. I, a weightlifting addict, spent most of my time in the free weight area trying to bulk up. Dave was obsessed with the cardio section, diligently working on the treadmill and stationary bike. In that cardio area, we met Chloe. She had a fit body, was always full of energy, and had a radiant smile. Chloe worked at a partner company in the same building, a typical office lady. I often saw Dave and Chloe standing next to each other, although Dave always pretended to be busy looking straight at the machine's console. After that, my company moved offices. My work schedule became erratic. I couldn't maintain a fixed workout time, and meetings with Dave became less frequent. One day I received a call from Dave. She's stalking me. I burst out laughing, thinking my friend was joking. Dave recounted that Chloe always appeared a few minutes later than him, but would surely choose the treadmill right next to him, regardless of how many other machines were empty. She would smile and ask Dave about his workout goals, about his weekend plans. Notably, she always finished her workout and left at the same time as Dave. That's peak time after work. Everyone has the same workout schedule and habits. That's totally normal. This is a deliberate boundary violation. She is a stalker. With every call, Dave's anxiety and frustration escalated. That weekend, things spiraled out of control. Dave had just bought a new SUV and was excited to drive 2 hours to a newly opened Walmart supercenter in the suburbs to hunt for discounted electronics. As Dave was looking at a large-screen TV, a voice rang out, full of surprise. "Oh my God, Dave! What a coincidence." It was Chloe. She was with her mother. Chloe introduced him to her mother. It was a casual, social gesture. But to Dave, who was steeped in paranoia, it was proof that she was trying to invade his personal life. He called to tell me the story and was practically exploding. What is she thinking? She followed me for 2 hours of driving just to run into me at some damn mall. I felt uneasy about his excessive anxiety. Dude, it's the mall. Thousands of people go there on Sunday. It's very likely just a random coincidence. You need to calm down. It's because of superficial weightlifting idiots like you that stalking murders happen. You don't understand the seriousness of this threat. Then call 911, you psycho. The police never do anything. After that, Dave's calls stopped completely. I was busy with work and didn't pay attention. I thought he had finally calmed down and accepted the truth. 3 months later, my phone rang. It was the local police department. The officer said my friend Dave had been arrested for stalking a woman. He was caught red-handed following her and was detained by her boyfriend. The officer asked me to come to the station because Dave insisted that the woman herself was the stalker and that I was the only witness who could prove he was the victim. I worried about going to court and the impact on my job, but I went to the police station anyway. There, the truth was revealed. The woman Dave was stalking was none other than Chloe. Dave explained to the police in a shaky, confused voice. She was stalking me, so I had to investigate myself. I was following Chloe to find evidence that she was stalking my mailbox and my apartment. The police cross-referenced the statements. Chloe recounted that she had felt followed for weeks after she politely declined Dave's invitation for coffee. She had talked to her boyfriend. That evening, her boyfriend ambushed and caught Dave while he was sneaking near Chloe's apartment after she'd left the gym. I wrote a full statement of everything Dave had told me, providing the messages we had exchanged. The police determined this was excessive paranoia. He was severely warned and forced to sign an official restraining order. I bailed Dave out. The police emphasized that he must quit the gym and seek mental health monitoring. Dave mumbled, "She has a boyfriend already." In that moment, I understood everything. Dave had fabricated the entire stalking story because his ego was hurt after discovering the girl he secretly liked already had a boyfriend. He was the victim of a tragic heartbreak and defensive paranoia. After that, Dave quit his job. Before leaving, he told me his final words, his eyes wide, filled with fear. Police patrol cars frequently slow down past my apartment. They visit often to check on me and lecture me on pointless things about stalking behavior. Dave believed that now, the police themselves were the ones stalking him, driving him insane.
My name is Josh, and I run the YouTube channel Josh and His Van. To me, my van isn't just a vehicle. It's my home, my studio, and my best friend on the open road. I'm used to the wolves howling in Yellowstone and the thick, foggy nights in the Appalachians. But what happened at the edge of the Umpqua National Forest in Oregon last January completely changed how I think about being alone. It was a gray, gloomy afternoon. I found what seemed like the perfect spot to park, right at the edge of the woods. It was open enough to get a cell signal, but close enough to nature to get some great footage. Everything started out slow and peaceful, just like any other camping trip. As it started to get dark, I decided to take a short hike into the forest to explore. I grabbed my camera and a flashlight and followed a narrow trail overgrown with roots and rocks. The air in the Umpqua forest at night felt strange. It was thick and smelled like damp, rotting wood. After walking for about 15 minutes, I stumbled upon a rusty iron gate hidden behind some thick brush. Behind it, standing tall in the eerie darkness, was an abandoned church. I pointed my camera at the gray walls, the shattered windows, and the crumbling roof. It felt pretty creepy. I got a bad gut feeling, so I decided not to explore any further and figured I'd just come back in the morning. I turned around to head back down the trail, but after a few steps, I realized I had left my gimbal leaning against that old iron fence. I turned back, and my heart nearly stopped. In the dim glow of my flashlight, I swear to you, there was a figure standing right next to my gimbal. It was a tall, pitch-black shape, and it was completely motionless. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just a weirdly shaped tree or a shadow from my light. But as I took a few steps closer, the figure suddenly vanished. It didn't move away, it just faded into the darkness without a sound. Terror hit me like a wave. I lunged for the gimbal, and at that exact moment, the iron gate behind me slammed shut with a bone-chilling bang. I didn't even think. I latched the gate and ran like my life depended on it toward my van, never looking back once. When I got to the van, I locked every single door. The feeling of being inside that metal shell helped me calm down a little. I made myself a hot cup of coffee and opened my laptop to edit video, trying to shake off the memory of that shadow by the church. However, the peace didn't last long. Around 1 a.m., as I was drifting off to sleep on the back bench, a tiny sound made me bolt awake, the distinct click of a door handle. Someone was right outside, quietly and patiently trying to open my van door. Luckily, I had locked up tight. I flipped on every light in the van, hoping the brightness would scare them off. The picking at the lock stopped instantly. A few seconds later, I heard an engine start. I risked a peek out the window and saw a sedan backing up and then speeding off into the night. I stood by the door, watching for a bit, but there were no other signs of life. I went back inside, made sure the locks were set, and tried to sleep. But the nightmare wasn't over. Around 3 a.m., I heard an engine again. This time, it wasn't the sedan from before. It was a rugged 4x4 truck. It pulled up and stopped in the exact same spot, just a few yards from my van. This time, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat there in total silence, watching. I couldn't see who they were, but I heard footsteps stop right next to my van. My safety was definitely on the line. I had no idea if these were the same people from before. I stayed quiet and could clearly hear their breathing and the sound of them walking around the van. Then, once again, the door handle turned. This time, it was forceful and aggressive. I felt the whole van shake slightly as they tried to wrench the door open. In a situation like this, you should leave immediately, but I hesitated. Part of me wanted to open the door just to see who was out there. Finally, my survival instinct kicked in. I had to get out of there now. I scrambled into the driver's seat, skipping all my usual safety checks. I jammed the key in, cranked the engine, and flipped my high beams on. In the flash of the headlights, I saw two figures freeze, their hands still gripping my van door. I floored it. The van roared and sped down the bumpy trail. Looking in my rearview mirror, I was horrified to see the 4x4 turn on its lights and start chasing me. It was a heart-pounding chase for 10 minutes down those winding forest roads. It wasn't until I reached the main highway and saw the lights of long-haul trucks that the 4x4 suddenly slowed down, pulled a U-turn, and disappeared back into the woods. I drove all night, too scared to stop, until the sun came up and I found myself in a small town over 100 miles away. Only then did I feel like I was truly safe. Later, when I watched the footage I filmed that afternoon, I saw something I had missed at the gate. In one very brief frame, as I pointed the camera at the church, there was a pale white face staring at me from behind a broken window. I still don't know what was standing next to my gimbal that day. I don't know why I was hunted. Was it a sick joke? Some weird ritual? Or did I accidentally trespass on something I shouldn't have? I'm still out here exploring, but I've learned a very expensive lesson about staying alert when you're out in the middle of nowhere.
I am Ethan, a software engineer. In early December 2024, I had just quit my job after a prolonged period of burnout. I wanted to escape the suffocating city rhythm, so I decided to try solo camping to find a sense of freedom and balance. I booked a spot at a remote campsite called Raven's Nest through a self-service website. According to the online information, it was a small, isolated camp in the Olympic National Forest. It was unmanaged, completely isolated, and only about the size of a football field. That absolute quiet was exactly what I was looking for. I arrived in the late afternoon. There were only 3 other groups camping: a middle-aged man traveling alone who introduced himself as Bronco, notable for his Denver Broncos logo ring, and 2 men riding Harley-Davidson motorcycles who looked over 40. They were rugged but spoke politely, carrying wine like connoisseurs. They seemed friendly enough. We exchanged a few pleasantries, and then everyone returned to their own tents. No one exchanged phone numbers, and I didn't feel it was necessary. As night fell, the camp became absolutely silent, with only the rustling wind and occasional sounds of small animals stirring in the bushes. But around 2 o'clock in the morning, I suddenly woke up to strange noises. They weren't the sounds of wild animals. They were the footsteps of multiple people and whispers very close to my tent. I immediately turned off my flashlight, crawled low to the ground, and peered out through a small gap in the bottom of the tent fabric. I froze when I saw at least 30 people moving around the clearing. They were walking in lines, carrying long wooden planks, arranging them as if they were building something. Everyone wore a slight smile, but their eyes were vacant. No one spoke loudly. Their movements were eerily synchronized, as if they were performing a ritual they knew by heart. A chilling feeling ran down my spine. Every instinct told me I was facing something that was not merely bizarre, but dangerous. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, texting my 2 close friends, Jim and Mitch, who lived nearby. I typed frantically, ignoring grammar. I'm camping at Raven's Nest. Something very weird is happening. I'm surrounded. There are so many people. I don't know where they came from. They are carrying wood. I'm scared. They're smiling, like they're hypnotized. I can't breathe loudly. They're getting close to my tent. Someone is pulling the zipper. Just as I sent the last message, the phone screen suddenly flickered and died. I was bewildered. The battery was full, and there had been no sign of malfunction before. I don't clearly remember what happened after that. When I woke up, I found myself curled up inside a cramped wooden box. The space was only barely enough for me to breathe. The gaps inside were packed with rocks, preventing me from moving my limbs. My entire body was freezing. I could feel a slight vibration underneath, as if the box was floating on water. I tried to listen. Outside, there was the rhythmic sound of lapping waves. There was no light and no human sounds. I was abandoned in the middle of a forest lake, inside a wooden box. I began to scream, pounding on the wooden walls with my knees and elbows. I had completely lost my composure. My head was spinning, and my chest ached with fear and despair. Miraculously, my cries for help were heard. Jim and Mitch, after receiving my texts, immediately set off in Mitch's pickup truck. They tracked my signal to a place called Echo Lake, a nearby campsite with a confusingly similar name. There, they found a group of people gathered around a huge bonfire, calling themselves the Meteor Watchers Society. Bronco's Harley and SUV were parked nearby, but I was nowhere to be found. No one claimed to know who I was. Sensing that something was deeply wrong, Jim suggested they split up to check the Nakiri Gorge area, a long closed canyon that had a trail connecting to Raven's Nest. It was there that they heard the screams coming from the direction of the lake. Mitch jumped into an old wooden canoe near the dock. He paddled out to the middle of the lake, where an object was floating. It was the wooden box I was trapped in. He used a utility knife to cut the ropes wrapped around the lid, then forced it open. I nearly tumbled out, soaking wet, crying, vomiting, my breath ragged from panic. We quickly returned to shore, but just as we got into the truck, 2 Harleys burst out of the woods and began tailing us closely. Jim yelled at Mitch to speed up. Mitch drove like a maniac on the bumpy trail, tires spitting out dirt and rocks, while the 2 men relentlessly chased us. It wasn't until we reached the main road and saw the town lights that they finally gave up. The 3 of us drove straight to the nearest police station in Clallam County and reported the entire incident. During the days I spent recovering in the hospital, Jim and Mitch decided to do some digging. They found that Raven's Nest was just a temporary camping post that reopened near Nakiri Gorge, the site of a mass disappearance back in 2011. According to old records, the area was once the operational center of a cult called the Meteor Riders. This group operated cyclically with meteor showers, believing they had to sacrifice 2 lives. One burned in fire to be offered to the Sky Dragon, and one drowned in water to appease the starry heavens. 2 days later, the police checked the Nakiri Gorge area, but there were no traces left. No tents, no cars, no fire pits. Everything had vanished cleanly, as if it had never existed. I recounted the entire ordeal, but they seemed skeptical. One officer said, "We didn't find the wooden box, and there's no concrete evidence." I understood the look in their eyes. They were starting to think I had imagined it, suffering from stress-induced hallucinations and panic. There was nothing to prove I had been kidnapped, except for a few messages I had sent. Everything else was the word of me and my 2 friends. This reality left me feeling more isolated and confused than the night I was locked in the box. 3 days after I returned home, I received a call from the local police. They informed me they had found a charred human finger left in the ashes at the Echo Lake campsite. On the finger was the Bronco's ring that Bronco had been wearing when I met him. Jim sighed when he heard the news. He was certain that Bronco was the fire sacrifice in the cult's ritual. Mitch recalled that he had smelled burnt meat mixed with kerosene that day, but at the time, he just thought someone was grilling. I remembered before going to bed, the 2 bikers had invited Bronco and me to drink wine. I only took a sip, but Bronco finished the glass. Now I understood. The wine had been drugged. Bronco was sedated and burned alive. As for me, because I only drank a little, they took me for the water sacrifice by stuffing me into the wooden box and leaving me to drift on the lake. I thought I had escaped, but a month and a half later, I received a strange Christmas card. The card invited me to a free dinner at a hotel in Seattle. The sender was a company named Meteor 5. I stood in stunned silence. Meteor means star. I no longer had any doubt. The Meteor riders were still alive, and they knew my home address. I started preparing to retreat from my old life. I sold my belongings, quit my job, and planned to leave the city. I wrote down everything that happened, not for sympathy, but as a warning. If someone invites you stargazing, camping, or to attend a free event, be cautious. Not all cults are just superstition. Some are organized crime. I escaped the wooden box in the lake, but I don't know if I can escape the meteor riders forever. I'm Lena. My job is serving drinks at a large casino on the Las Vegas Strip. Every work night is a battle of nerves. I have to smile at rude, drunk men who are ready to harass at any moment. But I have to keep this job because I need the money. New Year's Eve that year was especially exhausting. Around 10 at night, I dealt with a rude, drunk customer. I used my experience to calm him down, accepted the tip, and immediately used exhaustion as an excuse to leave early. As I was changing to go home, I got a text from my best friend, Abby. She pleaded with me to come to the luxurious suite she and a group of friends had rented for a New Year's party. The most convincing reason for me was that Josh would be there. Josh was a cute bartender I had been seeing recently. We hadn't made the relationship official yet, but we both had feelings for each other. Despite my fatigue, I accepted. Before leaving the changing room, I noticed an object placed on the bench in front of my locker. It was a pitch-black rose with a small folded piece of paper clipped to the stem. I opened it. There was only one handwritten line. "See you tonight, Mr. X." I was stunned for a few seconds, then smiled faintly. I secretly hoped the sender was Josh, trying to create a romantic surprise. But I was also curious. What did X stand for? I tossed the paper into my purse, picked up the black rose, and left. I called a taxi and arrived at the Belladonna Hotel around 10 p.m. The building glowed with lights right on the main avenue. The hotel lobby was packed, the sound of New Year's music and laughter echoing everywhere. I squeezed through the crowd, trying to inch into the elevator. Suddenly, a tall figure in a black coat stopped right in front of me. He wore a mask shaped like a blank, expressionless white face, revealing only his eyes. He stood still, staring straight at me for a few seconds, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. I shook my head, trying to ward off the chilling feeling. As I entered the elevator, the advertising screen mounted on the wall flickered. In a fleeting instant, I saw the image of the man in the black coat appear. I was startled, but the screen quickly returned to normal. I told myself, it must be exhaustion. Arriving at the suite, I immediately went to the private bathroom to freshen up. I locked the door. Instantly, the wall-mounted TV shut off and then turned back on. The face of the man wearing the white mask appeared, looking straight at me. I froze in shock. I could feel him smiling through his eyes. Then, he slowly spoke. "Hello, Lena. Does my black rose please you?" A shiver ran down my spine. He not only knew my name, but also confirmed he was X, the one who sent the flower. The initial feeling of being special vanished, replaced by horror. I stepped back and gathered all my courage to ask him a question that was almost meaningless in this situation. But it was my last hope. "Are you..." "Are you Josh?" He didn't answer. The image on the TV switched to a video clip. It was Josh sitting in the living room. The camera slowly moved, showing Josh leaning close to Abby's ear, whispering something. Abby giggled, her eyes full of hidden meaning. His voice was challenging. "Did your best friend call you here to see this?" I was glued to the screen. Josh and Abby were together for too long, too close. All my psychological defenses collapsed. I only felt jealousy and anger. Suddenly, the image on the TV shut off. I stood in a daze. It was just a prank, I told myself. Some weirdo hacked the TV. I tried to reapply my lipstick, regaining my professional appearance. My hand was still shaking slightly, but I tried to create a shell of calm. I took a deep breath, intending to step out, but the door wouldn't open. I tried turning the knob forcefully again, but it was locked from the outside. Is anyone there? I knocked on the door, but no one answered. The feeling of being locked alone in the silent bathroom was suffocating. My mind kept swirling with images of Josh and Abby being intimate together. I clenched my fists, my whole body restless, as if trapped in my own helplessness. I don't remember how long I was trapped until the music outside suddenly cut off. Then the countdown sounded. 10, 9, 8. I jumped up, banging hard on the door. "Is anyone there? Please open the door. I'm stuck in here," I screamed in despair. Just then, the TV screen mounted on the wall lit up again. "Happy New Year, Lena." I looked up, staring at the screen. It showed something. I squinted. It took a few seconds to identify the shape. At first, I thought it was a strange leather mask, but it wasn't. It was a person's face skin, a real layer of face skin peeled off with raw muscle tissue still clinging to the edges. Blood streamed down from the bridge of the nose to the chin. A ringing sound went off in my head. I backed away, clutching my chest. The screen was still brightly lit, exposing everything. "How do you like it now that I have the face of the one you like?" I felt instantly numb when I heard that sentence. Looking at the hair color and the small scar near the temple, I realized with horror, it was Josh. I let out a long scream. I rushed to yank the doorknob. This time, it opened. I dashed out of the bathroom like a maniac. I ran out into the hallway and collided hard with Abby. When we recognized each other, we both looked utterly panicked. Josh is dead," Abby stammered out. We clung to each other, screaming in panic until we were helped by hotel staff. The police quickly arrived. Josh's headless body was found. I told them everything about Mr. X, the rose, the video. It all sounded insane. The hotel handed over the surveillance footage. It only showed me entering and leaving the elevator and going into the bathroom. No one wearing a mask appeared near me. The security cameras in the casino also couldn't identify the person who left the flower. I started to doubt my own mind. 3 weeks after New Year's Eve, I was still living in fear. I didn't dare turn on the TV. I also didn't dare look in the mirror for more than a few seconds. Every time my eyes met my reflection, I remembered the mirror in the bathroom that day and Josh's face skin. One afternoon, I received a call from the detective in charge of the case. His voice sounded somewhat urgent. He informed me that Mr. X had been arrested. His name was Elias Mercer, 38 years old. He was a hacker, a stalker who had infiltrated the hotel system to monitor and manipulate me. He was also the drunk customer who had harassed me at the casino. Elias Mercer rented a standard room at the Belladonna Hotel, like any normal guest. But in reality, inside, he turned it into a control center with sophisticated equipment, allowing him to infiltrate the hotel's internal network system. It was through this equipment that Elias broadcast the chilling video on the TV in my bathroom on New Year's Eve. The police tracked him down through the unauthorized intrusion signal used to control the internal broadcasting system. When arrested, he was trying to delete data and restore the system to its original state to cover his tracks. On his personal devices, the police found dozens of videos secretly filming me at the casino, along with documents related to Josh and Abby. And he was the drunk customer who had harassed me right at the casino on New Year's Eve. I just wanted a beautiful girlfriend like you, but you chose that bartender. You have to pay the price. Just that one sentence. It summed up everything. The obsession, the insult he felt when I rejected him, even though I didn't remember his face, and how he decided to ruin me by taking the person I liked. Elias Mercer was sentenced to life imprisonment. I lost everything. I avoid enclosed spaces with TVs. I don't get into elevators alone. Elias is serving a life sentence, and the obsession he left in me is also a sentence. I am serving it every day, living in a world where I learned a terrifying lesson. Polite rejections, or the innocence of accepting a flower, can trigger a stalker's potential violence.
I'm Lauren, decided to be a single mom to raise my son, Baron. This horrific thing happened to my mom and my son 3 years ago, back when Baron was 6. It was early December and Christmas. The biggest holiday of the year was coming up. The streets were lit up with sparkling lights all over the fake Christmas trees along the sidewalks, making it feel all cozy, even in the cold. The busy tunes from the cafes and shops mixed with all the laughter from the shoppers. I took Baron out to grab some stuff and soak up the vibe. Inside the store, there were huge pine trees covered in lights and booths full of colorful gifts, making it feel like you were in some kind of holiday wonderland. My son and I headed out once the cart was full, and he was super hyped about the stuff we just got. At the entrance, we saw a Santa Claus guy, waving and looking all chill and friendly. Baron ran over all excited. Santa's gotta be every kid's favorite when Christmas rolls around. The kid gave Santa a friendly hello and grabbed his hand. I was pretty sure this was just a store employee. They really know how to grab people's attention and make them happy. I pushed the cart forward, gave a little smile and nod like I was saying hi. Santa smiled and asked Baron what he wanted for Christmas. An RC jet. I love it. It's so cool. Baron was totally pumped. I laughed a little, since that was actually the gift I was going to get him. You'll totally get the gift you want, for you're a good kid, right? Santa's compliments, along with the little reminder, made Baron nod. The way the guy acting like Santa talked was hilarious. He also asked how things were going for me as a single mom. At first, I was touched by the sympathy, but then it was clear I hadn't told him anything about myself, but he knew all about it. I smiled kinda shy and gave him a suspicious look. Hey, you ever heard that song about Santa kissing the mom on Christmas Eve, kid? He asked Baron, but his eyes, smile, and the whole vibe of the question were aimed at me. Before Baron could even react, and I was totally surprised, that Santa came up and kissed my hand all close-like. He didn't stop there, though. He tried to get even closer. I quickly stepped back and pulled my son away, feeling pretty frustrated. When I got to the parking lot, I looked back at the entrance, and that Santa was gone. Some people have such a weird attitude when it comes to customer service. Or is it just how people see things? I quickly shook off the thoughts about that Santa and started getting dinner ready for us. After dinner, we just kicked back in the living room, watching the Christmas special until it got pretty late. Out of nowhere, someone knocked on the door. I looked over, and then it knocked again. I told my son to stay put and walked over to the door.
Honestly, I wasn't expecting anyone to show up at 10 at night. I didn't open the door, just stood a few steps back and asked, "Who's there?" I heard that familiar laugh, like in Christmas movies, and then he said, "It's Santa." Right away, Baron yelled and ran over, but I signaled him to chill and stay put. I asked him what he was doing here so late. This wasn't even the day for giving gifts to kids. Honestly, I was just trying to keep things cool for Baron, but I was pretty sure there was a scammer behind the door. The guy claiming to be Santa said he found something I dropped at Kroger this morning. So, it was that store employee my mom and I ran into earlier. I asked him what the item was, but he just gave me some vague, smart aleck answer. I don't know, but just open the door and I'll show you." Thanks, but I didn't drop anything, and if I did, I wouldn't need it back. The guy clearly had no clue what I was talking about. He just kept going on about me opening the door and all the knocking. I made it clear again and told him I'd call the police if he stuck around for another 5 minutes. Eventually, he just left. I took Baron to the bedroom, and he wouldn't stop asking about Santa. I had no idea how to explain it to him. He'd totally freak out if I told him Santa wasn't real. The next morning, I called up Kroger's customer service to complain about their employees bugging me. But the info they gave me was wild. They said they don't have any employees dressed up as Santa at the entrance. I froze up, anxiety hitting me all at once. If he wasn't a store employee, then who the heck was he? My mind was all over the place with questions, and I couldn't focus the rest of the morning. I called the police right away and told them everything I could remember. They said they'd look into it and boost patrols around the area to keep things safe. I couldn't sleep that night. Every little sound freaked me out. I kept checking my windows and doors, feeling like something was watching me. A week later, the police called and said they caught some sketchy guy. He'd been reported for the same kind of harassment before, and turns out he had a record for burglary and trespassing too. After being grilled, he finally admitted to it. I was glad to hear he got arrested. Those cold eyes stuck with me for a long time. Baron was way too young to get what happened, but I figured I should teach him to be careful around strangers, even if they seemed friendly. That Christmas, we still put up the tree, swapped gifts, and made great memories with our son and family. But deep down, I kept reminding myself to stay on guard. The world's got its fair share of Christmas magic, but also some unexpected dangers.
I am Jason, 25 years old. Last summer, I had a terrifying experience, and I will never return to that remote countryside again. Diego, my best friend, begged me to take care of his dog Odin at his countryside house for a few days. At first, I intended to refuse. The house was isolated, surrounded by dense trees, and the air was always chilly, especially frightening at night. But Diego kept insisting, saying there was no one else to ask, and in the end, I agreed. The first day passed fairly peacefully. Odin is a large but gentle and loyal shepherd dog. We played in the yard, where the afternoon sunlight filtered through the tree leaves. The atmosphere was peaceful, with only the sound of the wind blowing and the distant chirping of birds echoing. The scenery was beautiful, but I couldn't deny that it gave off a strange sense of isolation. By evening, I took Odin for a walk around the house, fed him, and made sure everything was fine. Diego's house was beautifully designed and well-equipped, but when the sun set, darkness covered everything, transforming the place into a completely different scene. I shut all the doors tightly and turned on the lights everywhere to feel less scared. When the clock showed nearly 8 o'clock, my stomach began to growl. I ordered food from the nearest restaurant, which was over 30 minutes away by car. The wait seemed endless. The sound of the delivery motorcycle echoed from afar, and I quickly went to the door to receive the order. But just at that moment, Odin began to growl. At first, I thought it was just reacting to the stranger, but then it became unusually agitated. Odin barked loudly, the bark echoing through the silent night, then suddenly charged straight out the door. I panicked, quickly locked the door, grabbed the flashlight, and ran after Odin. Its bark echoed somewhere in the darkness, leading me away from the house without me even realizing. I walked through the narrow paths, where dry branches cracked underfoot. The surroundings were only lit by the faint light of the flashlight, and the dense darkness seemed to want to swallow everything. The wind whistled through the trees, carrying a strange, musty smell. A chill ran down my spine, making me shiver. Odin's bark sounded again, but this time it seemed farther away, as if carried off by the wind. I shouted its name, but all that answered was the echo. My heart began to race, and anxiety grew with each passing minute as I realized I was lost. I continued to follow the sound, but everything around me seemed to be playing hide and seek with me. The sound of a broken branch cracked behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing but darkness and rustling leaves. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that it was just my imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. Every step felt as if an invisible gaze was watching me, making me afraid to stop. Then I saw it. A tall, dark figure, standing motionless among the tree trunks. The figure must have been about 7 feet tall, its body thin and rigid. The flashlight beam revealed a faded baseball cap worn on its head. I stood frozen, my throat dry, and my legs felt like they were nailed to the ground. It took me a few seconds to realize that it was just a mannequin. It was made of straw, covered in old, tattered clothes. But why would there be a mannequin placed in the middle of the forest? Who made it? And for what purpose? Feeling extremely uneasy, I decided to return to the old path, even though I wasn't sure I was going in the right direction. My mind was spinning with chaotic thoughts, and my legs felt tired with every step. When I finally escaped the forest, Diego's house appeared dimly in the flickering light. I almost collapsed when I entered the house. The clock was now almost 2 a.m. Odin has not returned yet. I sat down on the chair, holding a glass of water with shaking hands, trying to calm myself down. But the feeling of anxiety and guilt still weighs heavily in my heart. I blame myself for letting Odin get away. That whole night, I couldn't sleep, just waiting in vain. The next morning, I continued to search everywhere for Odin, but there wasn't any trace. When Diego returned, I had to confess that Odin was missing. His eyes were full of anger, but underneath it was sadness that couldn't be hidden. Odin is not just an ordinary dog, but also a close friend for 10 years, a gift from Diego's late father. I don't know what happened to Odin in the forest that night. The feeling of guilt still haunts me, and the image of a tall, black shadow in the forest always appears in my dreams. I just hope that Odin has found a safe place, but I still fear that he has been caught up in something more terrible, and I will never forget that terrible night.
My name is Emily Carter, 21 years old, currently majoring in psychology at New York University. To cover my tuition and living expenses, I work part-time at a McDonald's in downtown Manhattan. My shifts usually last until the early morning, and I always have to walk a long way back to my small apartment in the Lower East Side. That night, everything seemed as usual, just like any other day, until I experienced one of the most terrifying encounters of my life. The clock on my wrist read 3:15 a.m. when I left the store. The streets were deserted, with only the yellow glow of the streetlights and the sound of wind blowing through the dark alleys. The fatigue from the long shift made me want to get home as quickly as possible. I put on my headphones, letting a soft jazz tune fill the silence. As I walked, I suddenly felt the sensation of being watched. A man stood at the corner ahead, under the dim streetlight. He was tall and thin, wearing a gray hoodie and faded jeans. His messy hair and deep-set eyes made me uncomfortable. He took a small step forward, his gaze fixing on my face.
I tried to walk faster, but he approached me, his lips curling into an unsettling smile. He complimented me on being beautiful, his voice deep and soft, but it made me shiver. It was clear he was trying to seem friendly, but his eyes pierced through me. I made up a name, just wanting to end the conversation as quickly as possible. But then, he moved closer, reaching out to touch my shoulder. I stepped back, a chill running down my spine. "Sorry, I have to go," I said quickly, hoping he would take the hint. But no, he kept following me. His footsteps were heavy behind me, each step matching the frantic beat of my heart. He offered to walk me home, but I immediately declined, feeling that something was terribly wrong. My refusal seemed to have no effect. I tried to stay calm, trying not to show my fear, but with every passing second, his presence felt more threatening. I glanced around, hoping to see someone or a car, but the street remained eerily quiet. I felt trapped between the darkness and this unwanted man's presence. As I neared my apartment building, I thought I was finally going to escape, but a horrifying thought crossed my mind. He could follow me inside. My building had no security, and the front door was often only locked temporarily. If he followed me in, there would be nothing stopping him from finding where I lived. He began pleading, his voice growing more desperate. I shook my head, standing in front of the door, trying to stay calm, but I was drenched in sweat. I knew if I didn't act quickly, I might be in real danger. Just then, the building door suddenly opened from the inside. A neighbor, Mr. Johnson, had just returned from his night shift. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly slipped inside while he kept the door open. The man outside tried to follow, but I managed to slam the door shut just in time. The window glass separated me from his angry stare. I ran up to my apartment, my feet barely touching the ground. When the door finally locked behind me, I collapsed on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the fear overtaking me. The light from the small room was not enough to chase away the darkness in my mind. The next morning, I started the day with a heavy heart. When I opened the door to my apartment, a stack of photos fell to the floor, startling me. I picked them up and was horrified to find a photo from a year ago, when I had just started working at McDonald's, with my hair dyed bright blue. The photos were taken from very close distances. A message was sent to my phone, making my body tremble as I read it. "I've always been watching you, Emily. Every night I've been standing across the street, watching you from the window of the apartment across from yours, from the moment you start your shift until you come back. You never noticed me, but I've always been there." My throat tightened, and I couldn't breathe. The feeling of fear and helplessness overwhelmed me as I realized the man had been watching me for a long time, from a very close distance. After that terrifying night, I moved to a new apartment and changed my part-time job. I decided to change my routine, saving money to take a taxi after every shift, no matter what other expenses I had to cut. Still, the figure of that man haunted me in my dreams. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if Mr. Johnson hadn't happened to show up. The thought sends a chill down my spine. New York, the city that never sleeps, sometimes brings nights as haunting as this. I have never forgotten that night. The night I first truly felt fear. I was only 16 years old at the time, living with my parents in an old house a few miles outside of town. The house had an old-fashioned design with a sloping roof and stained glass windows. The wind would whistle through the cracks in the windows, bringing with it the smell of damp earth, making the place both cozy and eerie in its own way. We didn't own the house, but rented it through a middle-aged man, Mr. Dwight. Both my parents worked the night shift at the town hospital, my dad in the emergency room, and my mom as a nurse. They would leave the house late in the afternoon and not return until the next morning. So, I was used to being home alone, even though it could be a bit chilly and sometimes downright scary. That night, the sky outside was pitch black. I sat in the living room, the dim light from the lamp casting a soft yellow glow on the cracked walls. I was curled up on the couch, reading an old book, when I heard a noise. It sounded like someone walking on the gravel outside. At first, I thought it was the neighbors' pets. They often ran into my yard like that. But then I heard another sound. It was a light tap on the window. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. Through the dim light, I saw a shadow outside. His eyes sent a chill down my spine, slowly, as if peering right through the glass, looking straight into my mind. He pressed his hand against the window, as if trying to get a better look inside. I froze, not daring to move. After a moment, he started walking around the house, trying all the doors. The back door creaked as he grabbed the handle, then the side door, then the front door. Each movement was smooth and deliberate, as if he knew the house layout very well.
I know you're in there. Don't hide. I have a special gift for you,
he said in a flat, drawn-out voice. I snapped out of my fear-induced stupor and ran to lock all the doors, securing each lock as quickly as I could. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the key, trying to twist it fast before the man got any closer. I looked up and saw that he had returned to the living room window. His eyes were fixed on me through the glass, peered on his face under the dim light. I tried to stay calm and reached for the phone on the table. I texted my dad. "Dad, there's a strange man. He's walking around the house. Please come home." I didn't call because I was afraid he might hear the ringtone or my voice. The house was so quiet that even the smallest sound could echo. When I sent the text, I heard the window shaking. He was trying to open it. I crawled off the couch, doing my best not to make any noise. I hid in the dark corner between the couch and the bookshelf, listening to my own breath. The wind outside still howled, but his footsteps and the sound of the door handles rattling as he tried to open them made my heart race. He was muttering something, but I couldn't make out the words. Time seemed to stretch on, as if every second lasted an eternity. Then suddenly, everything went silent. No more footsteps, no more tapping. I didn't dare leave my hiding spot. A little while later, I heard the sound of my dad's car pulling into the driveway. I ran outside, tears streaming down my face, and threw myself into my dad's arms. My dad looked around and saw a small brown box right in front of the front door. On top of it was a piece of paper with messy handwriting, a gift for my little girl. Inside the box was an old, worn doll with wide, unblinking eyes. My dad scanned the area, then noticed a pale pink envelope right by the door. My name was written on it in capital letters, along with a small heart symbol next to it. Inside the envelope were photos of me, watering plants in the garden, laughing while playing with the dogs, and even one of me sleeping in my own room. I felt my blood run cold when I saw the scribbled note on a small piece of paper. "You look so beautiful when you're alone." The police arrived shortly after and began searching the house inside and out. The next morning, they discovered fingerprints on the living room window where the man had tried to open it. Additionally, security footage from a nearby house showed him lurking around the area that night. When the police investigated further, they found a hidden door in the basement, a door that my family had never known about. The door led to a secret room filled with strange objects, old film reels, antique cameras, and numerous photographs of women, including me. The police confirmed that part of the house's structure had been altered before it was rented out, serving a sick purpose. Mr. Dwight, the landlord, was immediately arrested. He quickly confessed to his crimes, but did so with a disturbing sense of pleasure. He also admitted that he hadn't just done this to my family. The house was his great design, a place where he had lured many victims before. Some girls had luckily escaped, but not all of them. That secret room was now part of the investigation, into missing persons cases in the area. So it turned out that his friendly and eager demeanor, promoting the house as a safe, peaceful place for families, was all an act. He had even agreed to lower the rent, claiming it was to keep the house occupied and prevent damage. But all of those actions were not out of kindness. They were because he wanted easy access to my family, especially me. My family immediately packed up and moved to a place closer to town, with friendly neighbors and modern security systems. We sold most of our old belongings because we didn't want to take anything that had once belonged to that house. But even though we had moved, the haunting never left me. Sometimes, I dream of Mr. Dwight's eyes watching me from the basement window, staring at me unblinking. I always feel like someone is watching me, even when I know I'm in a much safer place. My name is Lily, and the story I'm about to tell took place when I was 10 years old. My family moved to a remote countryside area in Montana when my father got a new job. Our house was quite small, made of wood, nestled between rolling hills and endless stretches of pine forests. The landscape here was very peaceful, to the point where sometimes I felt completely isolated from the world. My father was a carpenter. He often spent hours in his workshop, making tables and chairs that he was very proud of. My mother stayed at home as a housewife and took care of the family. There weren't many neighbors around our home and no one my age, so I spent most of my time either playing alone in the backyard or reading books in my room. I loved the sense of freedom here, but at times, the solitude made me feel uneasy. About half a mile from our house stood the old house of Mr. Howard, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. He was elderly and lived alone. People around here said he used to be a soldier, but ever since returning from the war, he lived in isolation, rarely interacting with anyone. Mr. Howard would often stand by the gate, staring at me when I came home from school, his deep-set eyes sending shivers down my spine. I wasn't sure if it was just his odd habit. Everyone in the village avoided him, and I wasn't an exception. One afternoon, as I was walking home from school, I had the feeling that someone was watching me from afar. I slowly turned around to check and was startled to see Mr. Howard standing on his porch, staring intently at me. I greeted him, keeping the proper respect for an elder, then walked away faster. When I looked back, thinking I'd gone far enough, I was shocked to see Mr. Howard still standing there, eyes never leaving me. A faint smile on his face made me want to run, but also made me curious. That evening, it was quite late, and I didn't want to sleep because I was engrossed in a new toy my father had given me that afternoon. Suddenly, I noticed the flashlight light flashing through my bedroom window. At first, I thought it was just a car's headlights or someone's flashlight, but my room was on the second floor, and the light always came from a specific spot outside the pine forest, repeating several times. I covered myself with the blanket, tightly closed my eyes, and hummed a familiar tune I often sang whenever I felt anxious, then eventually fell asleep without realizing it. The next morning, I didn't tell my parents, maybe because I was used to dealing with things on my own after being alone for so long. One late afternoon, while playing in the backyard, I happened to see Mr. Howard standing near the forest behind our house, holding something shiny in the sunlight. He kept waving the object in his hand, muttering angry curses and scolding. I stared for a few seconds, then suddenly realized that it was a blade, the sunlight reflecting sharply on its metal surface. A sudden chill ran through me. I quickly ran into the house and locked the door. My heart pounded in my chest, but curiosity still lingered, so I peeked through the window to see if Mr. Howard had left. My mother noticed my strange behavior and asked if something had happened. I was about to tell her, but then I shook my head and smiled weakly. I was afraid she wouldn't believe me and would think I was imagining things. That evening, the light didn't just flash through the window, but lingered longer. I quickly pulled the blanket over my body, trying to control my breathing. My heart raced, and I couldn't bring myself to stand up and look. When I couldn't bear it any longer, I was about to call my parents when the light suddenly went out, and everything returned to the eerie silence. It took me a long time to fall asleep, my eyes heavy. The next morning, my father discovered strange footprints near the window while cleaning the backyard. The footprints were large, with mud clearly left from the forest. My mother mentioned that she had also heard footsteps the previous night. Immediately, I told my parents about the 2 times the light had flashed into my room through the window. I burst into tears, my 10-year-old strength having reached its limit. From that day on, I could feel the tension quietly spreading throughout the family, like a small flame smoldering. That night it rained heavily, and the wind howled through the cracks in the doors, with tree branches scraping against the window like eerie whispers. I tried to focus on my book to forget everything, but then a soft knock came from the window. I froze for a few seconds, then trembling, I went over and drew back the curtains, only to be stunned. Mr. Howard was standing on a ladder, his face so close that I could see every wrinkle. He knocked again, and with his other hand, pointed to the door. His lips moved as though he wanted to say something, but I couldn't hear anything. I screamed and ran straight to my parents' room, incoherently pointing toward the room, tears streaming down my face. My father grabbed the shotgun and rushed to my room, while my mother called the police. Even though my mother held me tightly, a coldness still enveloped my body. When the police arrived, they didn't find Mr. Howard, but they discovered a ladder and a flashlight left near the window. The footprints led deep into the forest and then disappeared, possibly erased by the heavy rain. The next morning, the police came to Mr. Howard's house. The front door was unlocked and the inside was messy, filled with old items. On the old sofa, Mr. Howard's body was found, still drenched from the rain. His face was covered by his disheveled hair, and his eyes were still wide open, staring at something tightly clutched in his hand. It was a photo of a little girl who looked very much like me, standing in the middle of a field of flowers, her eyes shining with happiness. The police continued their investigation and discovered that the girl in the photo was Mr. Howard's daughter. She had passed away many years ago in an accident on a stormy night when he was still serving in the military. Mr. Howard couldn't overcome the shock of losing his daughter. Perhaps when he saw me, he mistook me for his daughter. His many stares were actually him keeping watch, and the flashlight shining through the window was his way of trying to protect his little girl from some danger. In his journal, the police found a scrawled note: "Be careful, don't let them take you." One evening, I ran into the backyard to retrieve a toy I had dropped. Suddenly, from the direction of the forest, I saw the faint light of a flashlight flash and then disappear quickly. My heart pounded in my chest, and I stood frozen, unable to take my eyes off the spot. A chilling, indescribable feeling of unease engulfed me. Since then, the flashlight beam has always been a haunting presence for me. Every time I see a flicker of light in the dark, I remember that moment, and the fear rushes back. Now, as an adult, I look back at everything and wonder, could the flashlight that shone into my room that night not have been Mr. Howard? Maybe he was just trying to protect me from some other danger. I'm just thankful that my family is still safe to this day,